you've probably heard it stated. Remember, almost anything you hear about the Council of Nicaea, the first Council of Nicaea, 325, not Nicaea II in 787, I cannot imagine a greater chasm of difference between Nicaea I and Nicaea II. It's completely different things. Just, wow. Anyway, anytime you hear someone saying, well, at the Council of Nicaea, if it's almost anything other than they argued about homoousios, homoiousios, and heterousios, which is what it was about, they're probably lying to you. And what you will hear over and over again, well, the Emperor Constantine, he made Christianity the official state religion of Rome. You'll see that all over the place. All over the place. Now, they generally don't know what was that. Was that the Council of Nicaea in 325? Was that the Edict of Toleration in 313? But they don't know. But Constantine did it. Now, there's a lot that needs to be said about Constantine. Constantine did die an Arian. He turned against Nicaea. His sons were Arians. Eastern Orthodoxy literally uses the Greek phrase isopostolos, equal to the apostles of Constantine. Nowhere near that. Not even close. But since Eastern Orthodoxy in general is 9th century Byzantine state religion, then you can see why Eastern Orthodoxy and the state just you can't extricate them. I mean, you see what's going on? Ukraine, Russia, the ethnic divisions amongst the Orthodox. There's historical reasons for all of that stuff. There really is. Old calendar, new calendar. Oh, there's this all sorts of stuff. Anyway, Constantine proclaimed Christianity a religio licita up until the Edict of Toleration. Actually, it wasn't even Constantine. But he promulgated this, made it empire-wide. Before this time, remember, 303 to 313, worst period of Christian persecution. Rome decides to wipe Christianity out. Everybody. So 10 years, if you're a Christian, you die. That's how we're going to do it. So Christianity is a religio illicita, an illicit religion. Because remember, in the Roman Empire, Rome, covered such vast areas so quickly that they're not going to wipe out the religions of the native people. That's how you make martyrs. That's how you make sure you're constant war. No, you let the people have their religions. All they have to do is recognize the sovereignty of the emperor. Now, that's going to develop over time. It's going to take a greater and greater point. But Rome allowed for many licit religions, but Christianity wasn't one of them. So with the Constantinian Revolution, and with Constantine professing to be a Christian, even though he's not baptized till right before his death, and by an Arian, people try to rewrite the history on that. But anyway, you have Christianity being licit, no longer illicit, but it was not made the official religion of the state. What you need to know is that took place in 380 under Emperor Theodosius. Now, if you're thinking time-wise, okay, 380 and Rome in the West pretty much falls about 430. So you're only talking 50 years. And between Constantine and Theodosius, you have the Arian resurgency, you have a pagan emperor, Julian the Apostate, who rejects Christianity, tries to wipe out Christianity. He was only emperor for like 3 years, so he didn't get a lot done, but interesting stuff going on. But when was Nicaea reaffirmed? 381, Council of Constantinople. So 380, Theodosius proclaims Christianity to be the religion of the Roman state and outlaws everything else. There's persecution, there's expulsions, executions. This is where you get Christian nationalism. They shouldn't be looking to Constantine. They should be looking to Theodosius if you really want to get that Protestant Franco guy, as some of these weirdos are saying. What? Christian prince. Yes, he was a Christian prince. Now, 10 years later, 390, sometime in the spring of 390, in a town you may have heard of before called Thessalonica, Thessaloniki in Greek today, there was a garrison of foederati. Now, what are foederati? Well, foederati are basically barbarian troops serving under Roman command. One of the clearest evidences of the degradation of the Roman Empire, starting only, 100 years after Christ, really, is when you see mercenaries, people being paid to do Rome's bidding who are not actually Romans themselves. And, mercenaries have a long history in warfare. They've played important roles, but they've also turned a lot of battles when they wouldn't hold because they're just getting paid. If it looks like they're about to get shellacked, they're going to run. Anyway, there were Gothic foederati in Thessalonica under a Gothic military commander by the name of Botheric. And Botheric arrested and imprisoned a popular charioteer. Now, if we want to sort of bring it up to modern times, he arrested. I don't even know, honestly. Have the NBA finals? Are they still in the playoffs? I don't. Sorry. I used to enjoy basketball, especially when my son was really into the Suns and thinking, Charles Barkley and all that was fun back in the 90s. But it's boring now. When you can pick the ball up, run down the court, and smash it in without ever bouncing it once, who cares? It means you don't care about the game anymore. They don't call travels on the guys that. I think once you get past a certain number of millions of dollars per year in your contract, then you can travel all you want. I guess that's how it works. I don't know. Huh? Yeah, whatever. It's just not even worth watching anymore. And of course, all the woke stuff and everything else. It's just like, forget it. So it would be like, so I'm not even sure who the big star in maybe the finals coming up would be if there's a big name. But let's say a few years ago it was Steph Curry. Okay, Steph Curry can shoot the lights out from, the neighboring parking lot. And so it would be like this guy arrested Steph Curry and put him in jail and wouldn't let him out for the finals. All right. So there's this charioteer. He's the best there is. I guess he's got a lot of fans. Probably has a Facebook page, stuff like that. And Botheric refuses to let him go, even though the citizens of Thessalonica Let them out. Let them race. We've got a big race coming up. This is important. Won't do it. So, they riot. The citizens of Thessalonica riot. They overwhelm the garrison. Botheric and several of his officers are killed by the mob, and their bodies were reportedly dragged through the streets, which sadly has happened many, many times down through history in many, many different contexts. Well, Theodosius was staying in Milan. Milan had sort of become the capital of the Western Roman Empire at this point. And so what happened is, late April or May of 390, imperial troops invited the population of Thessalonica to the Hippodrome, ostensibly for games. And once the crowds were assembled and trapped inside, the soldiers were unleashed. The massacre lasted approximately 3 hours. Ancient sources put the death toll at 7,000. Men, women, and children. Indiscriminate. The soldiers just came in, blocked the exits, and hacked people to death. They weren't looking for the people who actually killed Botheric or anything like that. It was just punish the city and punish the people. Now, I mentioned Milan. One of the greatest ecclesiastical name at this point in church history is Ambrose of Milan. So Ambrose, for example, is going to have a huge impact on Augustine, who's going to come shortly thereafter him. So Ambrose writes to Theodosius. Now, there's some discussion, did he write to him before this happened? And Theodosius softened, but then there was miscommunication. It's hard to say. But what happens is Ambrose is horrified by what he hears Theodosius has done in Thessalonica. Theodosius was not just a nominal Christian. He was, as far as we can tell, a genuinely pious one. He was a believer. He attended church. He attended the sacraments. And Ambrose is the bishop in the imperial residence in the West, Milan. So there are huge political implications here. I mean, I'd like to think there would be somebody in Washington, D.C. with similar authority over President Trump, but there isn't. Of any denomination. Certainly not Paula White. You cannot compare Paula White to Ambrose of Milan. Ambrose wrote a personal letter which survives to this day. Very, very interesting. Before he left Milan, because he knew what might happen. And Ambrose said to Theodosius, "You are barred from the table. You cannot receive the Eucharist any longer. You have such blood on your hands." That he did not frame it. He did not put it. This wasn't political. This was spiritual. And the king is subject to God's law, and he had violated God's law, and so he had to repent. Now, this is only, 60 years. Well, so 390, so this is 77 years after the Edict of Toleration. And so the church-state relationship is still very much in flux. And so we are told that Theodosius tries to come to the church. Ambrose confronts him and refuses him entry. Now, later stories seem to embellish on it. There's always a danger of that happening in history. It would have been fascinating to have a video of it, to be sure. But what happens next is the whole reason I'm telling you the story. Theodosius accepts the penance. He took off his imperial regalia, his purple robes, the crown, and he performed penitential acts before the congregation. He, according to Theodoret of Cyrus, writing a good bit later, but still relatively close, historically speaking. He describes Theodosius prostrating himself, weeping, and crying out the words of Psalm 119:25, "My soul cleaveth unto the dust." He reportedly continued this penance for the full liturgical season. By Christmas, so remember, that was May. So by Christmas, Ambrose readmitted Theodosius to communion. When Theodosius, some sources say, reached for the altar area reserved for clergy, after receiving, Ambrose gently but firmly redirected him back to the nave, the space for the laity. The emperor complied without complaint. And Ambrose reportedly remarked afterward that Theodosius was the only emperor he had known who truly understood the difference between a bishop and a king. Now, if you're familiar with later church history, you know that 700 to 900 years later, in that time frame, you have the greatest struggles between a resurgent papacy, because you have the pornocracy in the 10th century. The papacy reaches its zenith, its nadir, the lowest part of its existence. The papacy's bought and sold. The Vatican's a brothel. And then there is a ascendancy in these powerful, powerful bishops. Partly fill in the vacuum of political power that has developed in the West. And so you have, the great story of the emperor standing in the snow for days outside of the Pope's summer palace in penance. But this is pure politics. There was always a theological thing assigned, but it was pure politics. It was the papacy was trying to become the ultimate political power in what we call Europe today. And this incident between Theodosius and Ambrose comes up over and over and over again. And it's used by both sides, depending on which side's going to be benefited the most by it. But this is the emperor that made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. And you need to remember, we look at history and we go, oh, well, the Roman Empire falls in the West, and you get all this fragmentation, And the East stands firm until the 15th century, fighting Islam and its own internal degradation over time and things like that. But remember, that's not how people in the West viewed things. They don't view things the way we do looking back across history. Yes, Rome had fallen in the sense of the barbarians sweep in and you have the Babylonian captivity of the church later on where the papacy leaves Rome and goes to Avignon, France, and then it's reestablished in Rome, and so they're excommunicating each other, and you've got two popes and all that stuff for a while in the Babylonian captivity of the church. That happens much later on, 900 years down the road. But the people in what we call Europe today were just simply looking for the Roman Empire to be reestablished. It was still there. It was just in bad shape. And so one of the things that lasts until the modern period and keeps popping up and keeps incarnating itself is the idea of the Holy Roman Empire, the HRE. And, Charlemagne, these great leaders in the medieval period, they all saw themselves continuing the Holy Roman Empire. That this continues that grandeur going back to Rome, even if they weren't in Rome. And all of that, the church was deeply invested in all of it. All of it. So when you look at Roman Catholicism and you look at Eastern Orthodoxy, both are deeply involved with the state. And it starts with Constantine, definitely. But it is a slow development, and it's not a linear development. It races ahead and takes, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It all depends. It changes over time. And when you ask, how much modern theology in both groups is due to politics, it's a lot of it. I mean, that's the big thing I keep mentioning about Nicaea too, and we're going to have to spend a lot of time on this in the not too distant future. I need to be speeding up my preparation, but at the Second Council of Nicaea, in the first session, they made everybody who held the iconoclast position that had been at the Council of Hiera, 754, they made them do public penance and repent before they decided the issue at hand. So there's not two sides that are going to debate this out. The one side has already been decided, this is what we're going to say. So this side, you're wrong. And if you want to stay here, you have to repent and admit you're wrong and join our side. And then we will proclaim our position. I mean, it's not even a council in any serious sense. In fact, they read the statements from the Council of Hiera, and their response is, I mean, anyone who reads it, you'd go, well, wait a minute, those were good arguments, and the responses are stinky. This is bad. I mean, they're quoting stuff that was never actually written. There's actually, we talked about this a little bit. We talked about some of these, fake statements that were read. They didn't know they were fake. We just know them today. Forgeries. And of course, the stuff from Basil and all that stuff we covered a few weeks ago. But these were political. The Seventh Ecumenical Council, you've got Constantine at Nicaea 1, and from that point on, 381, Theodosius, then 431, 451, all the way up to 787, the emperors and empresses, Empress Irene, 787 at Nicaea 2, They are taking more and more and more active roles in determining the outcomes, the theology that is going to be defined. And that's just a fact of history. And both Eastern Orthodoxy and Roman Catholicism have to, in essence, come up with a theology that allows you to go, and that's how God wanted it. And so you look at Orthodoxy and its inability to extricate itself from political entanglements today. It can't. I mean, it's interesting. Islam cannot extricate itself from politics because it is a religio-political system or political-religio system, depending on what percentage of the population it amounts to. It can't redefine itself. And neither can Eastern Orthodoxy. In fact, Orthodoxy especially is loath to consider evolution and change. That's why I'm the one sitting here going, I have a feeling by 2033 there's going to be some big, huge ecumenical something happening. I don't know what it would look like, but I just get this feeling that for the 2000th anniversary of the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, there's going to be this, we all need to get together, and there's going to be a bunch of pressure on Protestants to get involved too. But I don't know how that's going to work because Eastern Orthodoxy loathes any admission of change. They don't have a John Henry Cardinal Newman. They don't have a doctrine of development. And I don't think they could develop something like that fast enough. For 2033 anyways. So Eastern Orthodoxy isn't in a position to extricate itself from the reality that it is fundamentally Byzantine state religion. Ossified, petrified, frozen in time around the year 800. And for them, that's their strength. We're the Apostolic Church. We won't change. Well, that wasn't the Apostolic Church. That's the Byzantine state church. But that's what you've got. And that becomes both the strength, we're not changing, as well as weakness. We can't change. So I don't know what's going to happen with that, by the way. I'm just saying, keep your eyes open. I could be completely wrong. I just see these weird things happening, and it just seems to indicate that is probably the direction that we are going.